Pashas Behar. We spoke about last time that the Yidden, the Jewish people, came from the level of machshava, the thought, and therefore they're much higher than all the rest of creation, which created from the level of speech. And we said that there's two Shabbosim, the Shabbos Silo and Shabbos Tator, a higher level of Shabbos and lower level of Shabbos, which we'll explain later on exactly what it is. And we're saying the Neshomas came from the level of Machshava, Yisrael, Machshava. And even though the Torah Machshava is nothing compared to Hashem, in other words, the Eibishter is much greater in the level of Machshava also. For example, the thought of a person that comes from his thought, from his Nefesh and Neshama, that they are completely nothing compared to him, and do not make any change in a person. And he can think, technically speaking, thoughts with no end. And similar to that, also one thought is completely nothing compared to Hashem. As it says, that there's no change whatsoever in Hashem. So in other words, a thought is nothing compared to Hashem, and therefore also the level machshava is nothing compared to Hashem. Nevertheless, the machshava is higher than the level of speech. That the speech is called external clothing. For example, by a person has a clothing. Sometimes he wears it, sometimes he not. Similar to that, the speech, sometimes a person talks and sometimes not. It says, Eis ledaber, ve'es lachshus meledaber. There's time to think and there's time to talk, there's time not to talk. However, a thought is a more internal clothing that a person does not have a choice of thinking or not thinking. A person is constantly thinking. And the thought process is always without any stop. And is also everlasting, just like the neshama. So therefore, the world and the creation of the world came from the level of speech. And they were created from something, from nothing, in the Sheshem Bereshis, that's his time to speak. And therefore, everything goes slowly back to his original state of nothing. The same way as before the world was created. Why? Because they were created from the level of speech. And yesh es ledaber, yesh es lachshis. However, the neshama, because the neshama only machshava, therefore also before Sheshem Bereshis, they were still there. As it says, Im HaMelech b'melachta yosh v'sham. They said together the king. What do you mean they said together the king? Together with Melech Malcham Nochim HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the neshamas of tzaddikim were there. As it says, Shebeim Nimlach HaKadosh Baruch Hu Baras Ha'olam. The Eibishter, so to say, consulted in tzaddikim before creating the world. Therefore, they are also everlasting. In other words, before the world was created, and also after the world was created. Because it's similar to the thought, which the thought is constant. And the Seichel and Machshava, they're two friends that never disconnect from each other. And it's like you have animals that their clothing is part of them. For example, a turtle. The Levushe Minei is clothing, and him is one thing. And the neshamas are separated in much higher level. Each one is separate level of neshama, because there's 600,000 neshamas, general neshamas, which are corresponding to 600,000 letters which in the Torah. Even though in the Torah you don't have 600,000, in other words, if you count all the letters in Torah, you don't have 600,000. So why are we saying yesh shishim ribe eises l'Torah? There's 600,000 letters to Torah, but because from the letter, there's letters that come because of the nekudas, which are not part of the writing, but they're part of the words. But they're there in the thoughts. For example, kamatz is like aleph, like oh. So that's the part which is not written, but as if it's there. And the E, the chirik, is the E as if it's there. So each letter with the vowel is if another letter. But exactly what is the nekudas and how exactly the letter, we don't know exactly. Therefore, the question is, since the neshamas came for such high level, why they came to such a low level? And as we say, every day, Amisnasem Imeselom, much greater than the creation of the world, Berachamecha Ram Racham Aleinu, that should have tremendous mercy on us, that tremendous mercy in the neshama that came from such a high place to such a low place, from the level of the machshav of the Eibusha, which is much greater than the world, and he came down to this world, in the physical world, nefesh v'amis. Why was such a great ascent going down? But the concept is the Yerida Zu Tzorch Aliyah. That great descent is in order to have a great elevation, much greater later on, as we'll explain.